For this tutorial, you will need your selected yarn. I'm using Hobbii Horizon in the shade Desert. This is a gorgeous DK premium acrylic, and the colour just comes out absolutely stunning in this project. It also has some really lovely shades. I really like this one as well. So I will leave a link in the description box for this yarn. You will need 2 crochet hooks, a 5mm and a 4.5mm. You'll need a pair of scissors and darning needle for dealing with your ends. Stitch markers will come in really handy, and so will a tape measure. This pattern is available in 8 different sizes. There is the PDF pattern available, and it's also on the blog as well. So make sure that you check the description box below so that you can see the written pattern, as this video is designed to go alongside the written pattern. I'll show you the basic techniques of what you need for the pattern itself, but you will need to look at the written pattern for the sizes. I just wanted to touch on something before we get started in terms of the yarn. So with this yarn, it has a colour sequence. So when you are using the yarn, you can choose to use it from the outside or the inside, but make sure that you keep that consistent when you are using a new ball of yarn so that the colour changes are consistent. Now I have used mine from the outside, but I would highly recommend, if you are doing that, to use a yarn genie, because the way this is constructed in the ball, it can get a little bit tangled and undo as you're working with it. So I have been using my yarn genie to pop the ball of yarn on there, and then this clips on, and it just makes it super easy for working with. This is not essential, but it actually works really well, particularly with this yarn, but I love it anyway in general. So just bear that in mind when it comes to using your yarn. I also want to talk about the construction of this garment. We're going to be making the back panel first, just so that you can make some adjustments in the sizes if needed. We'll then be doing the front panel, followed by adding the sleeves. We're actually going to crochet these sleeves directly onto the front and back panels to minimise seaming. Once you have done the sleeves and the cuffs, which are all worked in one, we are going to do a bit of seaming up the sides and across the sleeves. And then we're going to finish by doing the neck ribbing and also the bottom ribbing. So go ahead and grab everything that you need, including the written pattern, and let's get started. So before we get started, we're going to make a gauge swatch. I really highly recommend that you do this, because you can see what your tension is like in comparison for the gauge that you need to meet for the pattern. If you get this wrong, then your sweater could turn out bigger or smaller, and you don't want to put all that time into making something and it not fit correctly. So we're going to do a gauge swatch, and you can follow me along with this, but also this is going to be exactly the same for the main stitch pattern as of the sweater. So you can use this when it comes to actually making the panels as well. So for your gauge swatch, you want to be using a 5mm crochet hook, and you're going to go ahead and create a slip knot in whichever method you prefer. And you're going to start off by chaining 27. So that's yarn over, pull through, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Go ahead, pause the video, and then meet me back once you've done 28 chains. So now you have your 28 chains for your gauge swatch. If you are doing the back panel now, then you want to take a look at the pattern to see how many chains that you need. I'm going to be making the extra small in this video. So I'm going to be chaining 63 for my initial chain, but you might have 63, 71, 79, 87, 95, 103, 111, 119 or 127, depending on the size. So please make sure you go and check out the pattern for those details. But for the gauge swatch is 28. We're then going to be working into the 4th chain from the hook, so not the one that's on the hook. We have 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we'll work a treble crochet, which is a US double crochet. That's yarn over into that 4th chain. Yarn over, pull through, we'll have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, that's 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook. So that's one treble, which is US double crochet, and then we'll work another treble crochet. We're then going to chain 2 and then work 2 treble crochets into the next chain. So not the one that we've just worked into here, this next chain we'll do 2 treble crochets, which is 2 double crochets in US terms, 1 and 2. And then we're going to skip 2 chains. So this is the one we've just worked into, we have 1 and 2, and then we're going to start a pattern repeat, which is 2 trebles into that next chain, 1 and 2, remember that's US double crochet, chain 2 and 2 trebles into the next chain, 1 and 2, and then skip 2 chains, and I'll just show you that pattern repeat again. So 2 trebles into that next chain, 1 and 2, chain 2 and 2 trebles into that next chain, 1 and 2. So you're going to skip 2 stitches and then repeat that pattern repeat all the way across. So it's 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles, miss 2 chains. You'll work all the way across until you have 1 chain remaining after you've skipped the last 2 trebles. So pause the video and then meet me back once you're ready. So now that you've worked your way across, you're going to miss those last 2 chains, and then you'll have 1 chain remaining, which you're going to do a treble crochet, US double crochet into. And then we're going to move on to row 2. So we're going to turn our work. We're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, which counts as a treble here and throughout. And then we're going to work into this chain 2 space just here. So we're going to work 2 trebles, 1 and 2, which is US double crochet, chain 2 and 2 trebles into that same chain 2 space, 1 and 2. And we're going to do that all the way across. We'll work 2 trebles into the next chain 2 space, 1, 2, chain 2 and 2 trebles, 1 and 2, and again chain 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 trebles. Go ahead and work that across until you get to your last chain 2 space just here, and then meet me back once you're ready and I'll show you how to finish off this row. So once you've worked your way across, we're going to work 1 treble into the top of the chain 3, which was the missed chains from the previous row. So it's just this one slightly on the side here. So work a treble, which is a US double crochet, into that last stitch, and then that is row 2. So going to turn our work, and we're simply going to repeat row 2, so chain 3 and repeat row 2, which is what we've just done, until you have 11 rows. So I'm just going to finish off this one last row to show you where to work your final stitch on this row. So I've worked my way across to this last chain 2 space, and I just wanted to show you where this final treble goes on this row, because it looks slightly different to when you're working into the first row. So you're just going to find it next to this last stitch, the top of the chain 3 just here. Work into there with a UK treble, which is a US double crochet, and you can go ahead and pause the video, rewind if you need to, and work row 2 until you have 11 rows. Okay, so now that you have done your 11 rows, you have your gauge swatch, and this is where we can use our tape measure to see if this is the correct size that we need for the Skylar sweater. So I'm going to measure over 4 inches, and I'm going to place this right in this section just here. So we want to make sure that we're in the same, starting and finishing in the same section. So I'm going to start right at this treble just here and go all the way across. So it's like in that space, and all the way across, and then the 4 ends in the space. And we're actually going to count the treble crochets only throughout this project. So that's how the stitch count is counted. We're not counting the chain 2s, just these treble crochets or US double crochets. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 and 16 treble crochets in the 4-inch space or measurement. And then we also want to measure the rows. So to measure this, I'm going to go in the space just here, because this is quite an easy place to locate. And then if I just make sure that this is straight, so I'm going straight down, it ends on this, the same space just here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows, which is correct. So for this swatch, you should have 16 stitches and 7 rows per 4-inch square. If you have too many stitches, then your tension is quite tight. So you want to go up half a hook size or a full hook size. If you have too few stitches in that 4-inch measurement, then you have, your tension is too loose and you want to go down half a hook size or a hook size until you hit gauge. If your rows are different, you might want to consider taking a look at this video here, all about the golden loop, which will help you with your row consistency. I'll leave a link in the description box of how you can adapt your gauge, but just take note of whichever hook size you end up using for your pattern. So I'm using a 5mm crochet hook. You continue with whichever hook you need to hit gauge. You're now going to move on to creating your back panel. So take a look at the pattern and chain the amount that you need for your size and do the amount of rows that you need for your size, following the same instructions that we've done for this gauge swatch. Then meet me back once you're ready for your final row of your back panel. So I'm going to demonstrate the final row of the back panel on my gauge swatch. But before I do that, I just want to talk about customization of the length of your sweater. At this point, you can add or remove any amount of rows that you want or need to on your back panel. I would measure it against yourself and see how it's sitting. Just be mindful that you are going to have a couple of inches of ribbing at the base of your sweater. But if you do want to add or remove any rows from the back panel, then do that now and make note of the amount of rows you added or subtracted, because that will become important when we come to do the front panel. For now, we're going to do the final row of the back panel. We're going to go ahead and chain 3 to begin with. Turn if you haven't turned already. Now the only difference with this row is that you're going to do 2 trebles or 2 US double crochets, and instead of chaining 2, you're just going to chain 1 and then work 2 trebles into that same space. So that's all you're doing for this final row, is you're not doing a chain 2 in between your 2 trebles, you're just doing a chain 1 and then again your 2 trebles. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way all the way across until you have done your final stitch in the top of the chain 3, and then meet me back once you're ready. So once you've done your final row of the back panel, you're going to go ahead and fasten off. You can sew in the ends if you wish, because we won't be needing that particular one. And then you're going to start by doing your front panel. So you're going to continue to use the same hook size, but the front panel we're going to stop so far up before we actually split for the neckline. So you want to take a look at the pattern and see how many rows you are doing before that point. For me, I am doing up to row 29, but take a look at row count for your particular size. So go ahead, do exactly the same. So you're going to be repeating the same chain length as before, the same stitch pattern, but stopping at where it tells you to for the front panel. So pause the video and then come back to me when you're ready for splitting for the neckline. So now that you've worked your way up to the split for the neckline, we're now going to work from row 1 again. It just makes this easier when it comes to explaining the different sections. We're essentially now going to do half rows, and you will find all of the information for the stitch count in the pattern. However, a really easy way to do it is just to make sure that you are taking a stitch marker and popping that into the central chain 2 space. And this just makes it super easy for whichever size that you're doing, like so. And then I'm going to turn my work and get started with row 1 of the neckline. So it's going to be really easy. First of all, we're going to chain 3, just as we've been doing before, and then work the same stitch pattern that we've been doing before as well. So 2 trebles, which is US double crochet, chain 2 and 2 trebles into that first stitch, and then you're going to repeat that all the way to the chain 2 space before the stitch marker. So go ahead, pause the video, work into that stitch, and then meet me back once you're ready. So now that you've worked your way across, we're going to work 1 treble crochet, which is US double crochet, into this chain 2 space where your stitch marker is. So work that treble, and then you're going to leave the rest of these stitches unworked. Now we're going to turn our work and work row 2 of the neckline split. And for this, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work our normal stitch pattern. So 2 trebles, 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 trebles into each chain 2 space all the way across this row. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way to your last chain 2 space, and then meet me back once you're ready. So at the end of this row 2, we're going to do as we've done previously and work a treble crochet, which is US double crochet, into the top of that chain 3 and turn our work. So now we're going to work row 3 and 4, and the row 3 and 4 is what we're going to repeat throughout the rest of this section. So you can come back to this section if you need a recap of what we're doing. So for row 3, we're going to chain 3, and then we're going to again work our normal stitch pattern. So 2 trebles, which is US double crochet, chain 2 and 2 trebles, 1 and 2. And you're going to repeat that until you have one chain 2 space remaining. So you'll repeat that all the way up until this last chain 2 space here and leave this one free. So go ahead, pause the video, work to this spot, and then meet me back once you're ready. So now that you've worked your way across and you have your 1 chain 2 space remaining, we're going to work 2 trebles into this last chain 2 space. So 1 and 2. So remember they're US double crochets. So that is the first row of our pattern repeat. So that's row 3. Turn our work, and then for row 4, we're going to begin by chaining 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work our usual stitch pattern into this next chain 2 space. So we'll work 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles, and then you'll work that all the way across into each chain 2 space. So we're now getting this really nice decrease going on this way, and the same will happen that way in order to create our V-neck. So work that all the way to your last chain 2 space, and then meet me back once you're ready. I've worked my way across, and then I'm going to work a treble crochet into the top of the chain 3, so that's US double, to finish off this row. So now you will have instructions which are split up into different sections. So extra small, small, medium and large have directions. Then there's also XL and 2XL instructions, and then 3X, 4X instructions, and 5X instructions. So you need to skip to the part of the pattern which is giving you instructions for that particular size. So it's basically going to be a repeat of row 3 and 4 for the instructed amount of rows. For the size that I'm doing, I'm going to do rows 5 to 8. And then I'm going to come back and do a final row. So for the extra small right up to the 2X, you're going to repeat those rows and then join me back for another row. For the other sizes, you are just going to repeat row 3 and 4. So go ahead, pause the video, take a look at the pattern and see how many rows that you need to do, and then meet me back once you're ready. So now that you've finished all your rows, for every size, at this point you will have finished on a row 4, but we're going to do one more row for any sizes between extra small to 2X, and that is simply by adding another row 3. So we're repeating row 3 once more. So we're chaining 3 and then we're working our stitch pattern as we have done previously, repeating our row 3. So go ahead, pause the video, work your row 3 once more if you're doing sizes extra small through to 2X, and then meet me back once you're ready. So now we're going to do the final row of the neckline split for all sizes. Now for extra small to 2X is going to be slightly different to the 3 to 5X in the way that we're starting on the opposite end. So for me now with the extra small size, I'm going to repeat row 4, but the only difference is instead of doing the chain 2s, we're just going to chain 1. And that's exactly the same for the 3X to 5X. You're going to be repeating row 3, but changing out the chain 2 to a chain 1. So for example, let's go ahead and chain 3 here to work row 4 again, and work those 2 trebles, 1 and 2, but just chain 1 and then work 2 trebles. So just as we did on the back panel, on this final row we're just chaining 1 instead of chaining 2. So go ahead, do that final row for whichever size that you're doing, and then meet me back once you're ready. So once you've finished your final stitch, you can yarn over and pull through and fasten off, leaving a long tail end for sewing. So we can use that to sew the seam of the front and back panel together. And now we're going to reattach this yarn to this first stitch just here. Now what I would say is, because of the yarn, you may want to, you may not want to, it's totally up to you. You may want to unravel the yarn so that you are at a similar spot to this side, just to make it a little bit more consistent. You may find that you've got quite a lot to unravel. It might only be a little bit, but that's totally up to you, whichever you want to do, whichever look you are going for. What I will say with this particular ball of yarn, and this has only happened for one, there was a split in the yarn, and when it got reattached, it got reattached somehow in the opposite way. So as this went to light blue to mid blue to dark blue, and then to dark pink to light pink, etc., it started going back the other way, which is why I've got this panel here with less blue in it. So I'm going to keep mine the same just for demonstration purposes, but you can unravel the yarn if you want to a similar spot in terms of your colour change, which is what I did for my original design. And then keep that yarn that you have taken off, because you can just use that for seaming. So I'm going to go ahead and take my tail end. At least this way, if I do it without changing up the colours, you'll see what it looks like to have the two sides slightly different. So at this point, you're just going to join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3, and then you can go ahead and chain 3 and you're going to follow the exact same instructions for this side. So it's going to be exactly the same, working into these unworked stitches. So your central stitch will be the same one as this last one just here where the stitch marker is. So go ahead and work the other side of the V-neck and then meet me back once you're ready. So now you have your front panel and your back panel complete. We're going to go ahead and lay these together. So at this point, there's no real kind of right and wrong side. So you can just lay it down however you feel best. But we do want to make sure that these sides are lining up so that we can sew these together. And we're basically going to sew the front panel to the back panel. So I'm going to use this long tail end that I've left here from the front of the neckline and thread up my darning needle. And I'm going to go through the first stitch on the front panel and then the top of the chain 3 of the back panel and pull that through. And I'm just going to do this all the way across, going stitch by stitch with using whip stitch. So just making sure that this side one lays on the top and just, as I say, matching stitch for stitch. You'll find yourself at that chain 1 space. You can go into that chain 1 and then into the chain 1 on the other side, and then just work your way all the way along until you've attached all of your stitches, and then do exactly the same for the other side as well. Fasten off on each side and you can sew in your ends at that point if you wish as well. So go ahead and do your shoulder seaming and then meet me back once you're ready. So now that you've done your seams, this now becomes the inside of the work. So I am just going to turn this so that the right side is facing out. And if it helps, then just grab a stitch marker and just place that stitch marker around any stitch on the front just to show or to remind yourself that that is the right side of the work. So now that your 2 panels are together, we're going to move on to adding the sleeves. So there is a chart in the PDF pattern that helps make this a little bit easier in terms of how many rows you need to count from the center seam in order to work your sleeves or make the foundation for the sleeves. So you want to go ahead and make your slip knots. And as you know, I'm doing the extra small. So I'm going to count 12 rows from the center seam. Take a look at the pattern to see how many you need to count. So this is the center seam here. We have the row end just here, and then we have another and then another. So we're going to count 12 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. So this is my 12th row. I'm just going to pop a stitch marker in there for now, just so I know that's my number 12. And then I'm also going to grab another stitch marker and count 12 the other side. So here's my seam. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. So just by adding the stitch markers, it just makes it a bit easier visually, but you don't need to if you don't want to. So we're going to start off working a standing double crochet into this row end, and for each size it's going to be slightly different, as in how many we're going to add. So I'm going to show you how to start working the extra small size first of all, which is also the same for the small, and then talk you through the other sizes because it will be slightly different. So we're going to do, as I say, a standing double crochet into that first row end, which is a standing single crochet in US. So we have our slip knot on the hook into that row end where our stitch marker is, yarn over, pull through. You'll have 2 loops on the hook and yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook. That makes a double crochet or US single crochet straight off the slip knot on the hook. So now we have a standing double crochet into that first row end. Now, depending on the size, you may just do a standing double crochet, or you may be adding another double crochet into this row end. But after that first one, we're going to do 3 double crochets into each row end. Depending on the size, you may be working into the center seam, so right into that center seam, or you may not. So please have a look in the pattern, and there's a chart in the pattern as well to see what you need to be working where for your setup row. So for me, I'm going to do another double crochet into that first stitch, which is a single crochet in US terms. Now we have this next row end, so I'm going to work 3 double crochets into there, all the way across until we get to the seam. So go ahead, pause the video, work until you get to the seam, and then meet me back once you're ready. Okay, so I've worked my 3 double crochets into each row end until we get to the seam. Now for this particular size, we are going to skip the seam, but for medium, large, 3x, 4x and 5x, you will actually work into the seam. So you'll go into that seam section where you can see your stitches. So as I say, for mine, I'm just going to skip the seam and then continue to work 3 double crochets, which is US single crochet, down each row end, right up until I get to the row end before my stitch marker. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way across to your last row end before the stitch marker, and then meet me back once you're ready. So now that I've got to my final row, I am going to do 2 double crochets into this row end because that matches what I've got in this original one. So for extra small and small, you're going to have 2 double crochets in the first and last row end. For the medium, large, extra large and 2x, you're just going to have 1 stitch in the first and the final row end. And then for 3x, 4x and 5x, you're actually going to have 3 stitches in each of those row ends. So as I say, there's a chart in the pattern, so take a look at that because that will help. And then that is our setup row finished. Then we move on to doing our sleeves. So all the sleeves, and this is the same for all sizes. So we're going to start off by chaining 3, 1, 2, 3. So this is row 1 for the sleeves. This chain 3 counts as a treble crochet. We're going to skip 3 stitches. So we're going to ignore that one at the base of the chain 3 because that counts as a stitch. We have 1, 2, 3 stitches. So we're skipping 3. And then we're going to work 2 treble crochets, which is US double crochet, into that next stitch. We're going to chain 2, and then we're going to do 2 trebles into the next stitch. So 1 and 2. Then we're going to skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to do the pattern repeat again. So it's 2 trebles into that next stitch, US double crochet, chain 2, and then 2 trebles into the next stitch, 1 and 2. Skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 2 trebles into that next stitch, 1 and 2, chain 2, and 2 trebles into the next stitch. Skip 3 stitches and then repeat that all the way. So you will have finished with skipping 3 stitches and then you have 1 stitch remaining. So pause the video and then meet me back once you're ready. So I've just worked my way across. I've done my last 2 treble, chain 2, 2 treble, and then skip 3 stitches. And then we have 1 stitch remaining, which we're going to work a treble crochet into. And then turn the work. Okay, so now we're going to work rows 2 through to 31. I've left this the same for all sizes, but you can adapt your sleeve length if you wish. Just be mindful that we are going to be adding ribbing to the end of this sleeve. So you need to take that into consideration if you are adapting your sleeve length. So for this, for row 2, it's going to be exactly the same that we've done for the main body of the sweater. So you're just going to chain 3 and then work 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles, which is obviously 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in US terms, all the way across, and then treble into the top of the chain 3 at the end. So as I say, you're going to work that from rows 2 to 31. So go ahead, pause the video, and then meet me back once you're ready. So once you've put your sleeve, yours will look longer than mine. I've only done so many rows just for demonstration purposes. We're then going to move on to creating the cuff. So first of all, we're going to do 2 setup rows. We will stick with the larger hook for now. So I'm just going to turn my work, and then I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. This does not count as a stitch. And we're going to double crochet, which is US single crochet, into this very first stitch. So go into the stitch, yarn over, pull through. You'll have 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook, which is double crochet, single crochet in the US. Then we're going to skip the 2 treble crochet, so skip 2 stitches, and then we're going to double crochet in the chain 2 space. So double crochet into there, and then skip 2 stitches and double crochet in this space here, so between these 2 trebles and these 2 trebles. And that's what we're going to do all the way along. So go into that chain 2 space and then into the next space. Technically not a chain space because it's between the 2 trebles. We're not chaining between those. So the space between those 2 trebles. And you'll do this all the way across. So go ahead, pause the video, work to your last chain 2 space, and then meet me back once you're ready. So once you've got to your last chain 2 space, you're then going to do a double crochet into the top of the chain 3 to finish off that first setup row, and you can see it just pulls in those stitches. We're then going to turn the work, and we're just going to do a second setup row just to help with this ribbing and make sure that this setup row is sturdy. We're going to chain 1, and then you're just going to work 1 double crochet, which is US single crochet, in each stitch all the way across. So go ahead, pause the video, work those stitches all the way across, and then meet me back once you're ready. So you've now done your 2 setup rows. What we want to do now is change to the 4.5mm crochet hook. Now, if you have adapted your hook size from your gauge, you want to make sure you're down half a hook size. So whichever is your smallest hook size, we now want to change to. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert my crochet hook here. And now we're actually going to do the ribbing. So we're going to start off by chaining 11. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. So this ribbing is going to have 10 stitches. Now if you want to make your ribbing smaller or larger, you can do so at this point. This can be customized to however you like it. It's going to be around 2 inches, the ribbing. So if you want it to be smaller, then take some stitches away, and whatever your chain length is your stitch count will be 1 less. So we've chained 11, we're going to have 10 stitches. If you want to do more, again, you just add more, and then whatever your chain count is, your row count will be 1 less. So I'm just going to flip this over because we're going to do the join as you go ribbing now. And how we're going to do this is we're going to double crochet into the second chain from the hook. So that's US single crochet, not the one on the hook. This is the first one and this is the second. So we go into that stitch, yarn over, pull through, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook, then into the next stitch with a double crochet US single all the way down. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. And then what we want to do is we want to anchor this down to the setup row. So we want to skip this first stitch here because those stitches sit on top of that first stitch. And then we're going to go ahead and slip stitch into the next stitch. And that anchors that row down. And we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch and turn the work. So we're now working our way back along this chain. So for row 2 of the ribbing, we're going to skip the 2 slip stitches. So we have 1 and 2, and this is our first stitch. So we're actually going to work just into the back loop of this stitch. Let me see if I can show you this a little bit better. So we'll just go into the back loop only of that stitch and yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, and just working into the back loop only of each stitch all the way across. Again, you will have 10 stitches. So we've done 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9. Now this last one can always look a little bit strange, so I would recommend that you do count your stitches, especially when you're going back up this other way. So we have 10, just to make sure you're going into the end one. We're going to turn the work and chain 1 to start row 3. This chain 1 does not count as a stitch, and then we're going to go into that very first stitch into the back loop only and double crochet our way across. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So at this point we're again going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. So just make sure that when you're looking, this one will be slightly elongated, this stitch, but you'll probably find that the slip stitches come all the way to the edge. So don't mistake that for your the stitch that you want to work into. So this stitch is taken, you will then want to go into the next stitch and then into the next stitch with your slip stitch. And we're simply going to repeat row 2 and 3. So you'll turn your work, you'll miss those first 2 slip stitches, and then you'll work into the back loop only of the next 10 stitches with a double crochet, which is US single crochet, making sure that you are counting so that you go all the way to the end, because that last one can be a little bit well, it can be easy to miss, like so. Chain 1, turn the work, and then work all the way back down with your 10 stitches, followed by your 2 slip stitches. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. And we're going to do our 2 slip stitches to anchor this down. So remember, we don't go into this stitch here, we go into the next 2, 1 and 2, and then you're going to repeat row 2 and 3 all the way across to the very end. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way across and come back and I'll show you how to finish off your cuff. So once you've completed your cuff, you've gone all the way across, this is what it will look like, and we're going to leave this like this for now. You can go ahead and fasten off your yarn, and then what you want to do is go to the other side of your work. So you're going to turn it round and have your right side facing you. So I've got my stitch marker here, And then you're going to do exactly the same thing as what you did before, counting out the amount of rows, marking with a stitch marker and working the other sleeve. So rewind the video to the sleeve section if you need to, but go ahead and work your second sleeve. We are leaving the sleeves open like this, and then meet me back and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so at this point you will have done your front and back panel, and then your two sleeves. We'll just imagine there's a sleeve here, but for demonstration purposes I'm just going to move on to showing you the rest of the work. But I am going to insert a clip here because at this point you do want to be blocking your work, so you can just pop your work in a flat piece with your front and back panel and your arms outwards, and then just gently block to the dimensions that are in the pattern. Make sure that you leave that to fully dry, and you're going to come back and we'll get ready to do the seaming before moving on to the final ribbing. So when it comes to do your seaming, you actually want to have the wrong side facing you. So I'm going to make sure that the stitch marker is on the opposite side, or facing away from me, down towards the surface. You're going to pinch the seams on the shoulder seam and then fold your work in half so that the front and back panel are facing right sides together, and then your arm folds down like this as well, so it folds in half to create the sleeve. And then we're going to do seaming from the bottom right up to the underarm and then across the sleeve. So grab some yarn. You're going to want to take a length of yarn, and you can either do this by doing the body and then the arm, or just do one long piece. I'm going to just do a piece for this edge here, and I tend to do around 3 to 4 lengths of where I'm working. And we want to take a darning needle, thread that up, and by doing just this section, it just makes it a bit more manageable, so you're not getting all wrapped up in the yarn. So you can take some clips and clip this together if you wish. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our darning needle and we're going to hold both panels together. We're going to go through this front panel right in the chain, so this is the corner chain of that foundation chain, and then also finding the corresponding chain on the back panel. Pull that all the way through. Now I like to pop a knot in mine. You can either do that or leave it, it's totally up to you. I like to do it, and then I also like to go through that same space just to really secure into place. Now we're going to be working through the row ends. So you want to pop through the row end and then pull all your yarn through. This first section can be really fiddly. You then want to go through the top of the stitch. So you're going through the row end and then where the two row ends meet, and make sure that you're going through the actual stitches rather than into the chain space, because this will just make it look a little bit neater when we turn right side out. You won't see the stitches as much as if you went through the chain space. So through the row ends and then in the connecting space between the row ends. Take your time with this, pull the yarn fully through when you're doing this, just so that you know they are nice and secure. And like I say, just take your time because you've spent so long making your panels already. You want to make sure that this part of it really lines up. So we're going to go all the way up this edge, working all the way up to where that stitch marker is, which is the underarm. And then we're going to start working down the underarm. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way up to the underarm, and then meet me back once you're ready. So now you've got to your underarm section. I've worked my way all the way across. I'm now going to turn my work. I've taken out my stitch marker, but I just want to make sure I place a stitch right in between the join of where the arm meets the main body of the sweater. And this is going to be exactly the same all the way across. I actually have some of my yarn still, I've got some of my yarn left, so I'm going to keep going using this, and I'm just going to work my way all the way down until I get to the cuff. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way down, and I'll meet you back just before you get to the cuff. So I've been super lucky and I have this much left when I get to my cuff. So rather than adding a new piece of yarn, I'm going to fasten off this yarn here, and I'm going to use the tail end left over from my cuff in order to sew up this cuff section. It just saves me having to sew in one piece and then attach another. But the method is exactly the same. We're going to thread up the darning needle or use the yarn that's already on your hook. I'm just going to turn my round this way just to make it easier. But you basically want to go through one or both thicknesses. You're going to go through the underside of the chain, and then you're going to work into the stitch. You're going to do that all the way across. So on the underside of the chain, and then the back loop only of the last row, and then pull through and just repeat that with the corresponding stitch all the way across. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this in each stitch. And I'm going to make sure that this is really nice and secure, so I'm going to fasten off. I'm just going to do knot it twice just so that I know it's super secure, and then all that would be left to do would be to sew in my ends. You can go ahead and repeat that same process on the other side, and then once you're finished you're going to turn the right side out so that the main seam is on the inside. So as I say, this has only got one sleeve, but obviously you will have two. You'll repeat that on the second side and then turn the right side out, and then we'll be ready for the neckline ribbing. So we're now going to do the neckline ribbing, and we are going to be using our 5mm crochet hook. I'm going to go ahead and create a slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to attach this into the centre space, so at the bottom of the V, with a slip stitch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 double crochets, which is US single crochets, around this first space. There's 1 and 2. And then we're going to do a pattern repeat. So the pattern repeat is double crochet into the next space, which is just here. And then 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches. So we have our 2 stitches just here. We'll go 1 and 2. Double crochet into the next space. And then we have the side of a stitch just here. So we're going to work around the post doing 2 double crochets, 1 and 2. So around that post. I've gone in kind of into the top of the stitch with that one, but you could do it both around the post in that space or 1 and 2. It's totally up to you. I just feel that that kind of evens it out a little bit. So we're going to repeat that pattern repeat, which is double crochet into the next space, 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2, double crochet into the next space, and then 2 double crochets around the post of the next stitch. You're going to repeat that all the way across. Now for the 3x, 4x and 5x, you will just have a simple pattern repeat to the seam. For all the other sizes, you will work up into your last pattern repeat and you'll have 1 space remaining. So go ahead and repeat that all the way until you have done, come to the seam or have 1 space before the seam, and then meet me back once you're ready. Okay, so unless you are doing the 3x, 4x and 5x, you will have this 1 space remaining. You're going to work 2 double crochets into that space, which is of course single crochets in US terms. We're going to skip the seam, and then we're going to work 1 double crochet, which is US single crochet, into each treble crochet, which is US double crochet, all the way across. So we're going to do 1 and 2, skip the chain 1, and then work 1 and 2. And we're going to do that all the way across. So double crochet into the next stitch, double crochet into the next stitch, skip the chain 1, and then 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches. So you repeat that all the way across until you get to the next seam. Pause the video and meet me back once you're ready. So now that you're at the seam, we're going to skip this seam, and for all sizes apart from 3x, 4x and 5x, we're going to work 2 double crochets into that first space. And then if you are doing the 3x, 4x and 5x, you will be starting at this point. So we're now going to do the pattern repeat, but we're essentially going to do it back to front. So we're going to work 2 double crochets down around this post of the stitch, 1 double crochet into the next space, 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and then 1 double crochet into that next space. So I'll just show you that repeat again. 2 double crochets around the post of the next stitch, 1 double crochet into the next space, 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and 1 double crochet into the next space. You'll repeat that all the way across until you have 1 chain space remaining, so 1 space here. Pause the video and then meet me back once you're ready. So we've now just come down this side of the neckline. We have 1 space remaining where we're going to work 2 double crochets into that space. We aren't going to join. Instead, we're going to remove our hook and grab our smaller hook. For me, that's my 4.5mm. And we're going to go ahead and do the join as you go ribbing again. So for this, we're going to start by chaining 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. I'm just going to turn my work so that I'm working across this side. Now, remember, if you want to change the width of this, you can add or remove rows. Whatever your chain is going to be, you're going to have 1 less of your stitch count. So we have 7 chains here. Our stitch count will be 6. And we're going to do the same as what we did for the cuff. So we're going to work into the second chain from the hook with a double crochet, which is a US single crochet. Working all the way down, that's 3, 4, 5 and 6, and then we're going to anchor this down by slip stitching into the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Then we're going to turn. We're going to work our row 2, so by skipping those first those slip stitches and then working a back loop double crochet into the next 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Chain 1, turn, and for row 3 we'll go back loop double crochet into those 6 stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2. So you're going to repeat row 2 and 3 all the way round. If you feel like you need further instruction on the ribbing again, please rewind to the cuff ribbing where I do go into it in a little bit more detail, but you're essentially going to work all the way around the neckline. The pieces won't join, but we'll be working with that once this has been made. So go ahead, pause the video, work your neckline ribbing, and then meet me back once you're ready. So now you've worked your way all the way around. We've just done the last row here. I'm going to go ahead and fasten off, leaving a long tail end for sewing. And I'm going to take my darning needle and attach that to that tail end. Now at this point you want to decide which side you want to be above or below. You can swap that out depending on the look that you want to have. I'm going to have mine like this. And then we want to sew that down into place. So essentially the end of this row is going to line up with the seam just here. So I'm going to take my darning needle and I'm going to just pull on that there and go through both thicknesses just to anchor that down. And then I'm going to come back through and then go down towards the back again. And I'm just going to sew that into place. I'm just going to go through like this for this one. And then we want to also make sure that this is sewn into place as well. So I'm going to pop that back through and then through the back. Lay it down. Bring it through. And then I'm going to sew this down through both thicknesses too. Just to hold that into place. And then just one more right on the edge just here. And then I'm going to go ahead and fasten that off, like so. Let's go back through once more. And then fasten that off. I'll just take a little bit off the tail end, ready for sewing in. And there you have the neckline complete. So now we're going to move on to the bottom ribbing. So for the bottom ribbing, I'm just going to turn my work so that I have the bottom piece down here. And we're going to be using our 5mm crochet hook. And we're going to join, create our slip knot. And we're going to work into the first space after the seam. So this one just here. And we're going to start off by doing a standing double crochet. So that's standing single crochet in the US. So we're going to have our slip knot on the hook, go straight into that space, yarn over, pull through. You'll have 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook. So we have our standing double crochet into that first space and then double crochet into that same space. And then we're going to be working into the base of the next 2 stitches. So we're going to double crochet into this next chain and into the next chain. And then we have our chain space, which we're going to work 2 double crochets, which is US single crochets. And we're going to work that all the way across. So double crochet into the next chain and the next chain, and then 2 double crochets into the next chain space. And you're simply going to work this all the way across until you get to the seam. You're going to skip the seam and then continue working all the way round. So you're working that same pattern, repeat, double crochet into the base of those stitches, and then 2 double crochets into the chain space, ignoring the seam. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way round, missing those seams, and then meet me back once you're ready. So I've now worked my way around. I'm going to join with a slip stitch into that very first stitch. And now I'm going to remove my hook and insert my 4.5mm hook, which is the smaller hook. And we're going to go ahead and repeat pretty much the cuff ribbing. So we're going to chain 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So I'll just show you this. We're going to double crochet, which is US single crochet, into the second chain from the hook and across. We're going to have 10 stitches. So this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We're going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and then row 2 is turn the work, skip the slip stitches and 10 double crochets in the back loop only, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Chain 1 and turn, and then work 10 double crochets in the back loop only, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, followed by slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. So you're going to repeat row 2 and 3 all the way around, and then you're going to join me back, because this time we are actually going to join one end to the other. So go ahead, pause the video, work your way all the way around, and then meet me back once you're ready. So I've just switched to my other larger sweater. So the ribbing starts on a slightly different colour, but I've worked my way around with this, and this is what yours should be looking like. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and join the first row to the last row. It's going to chain 1, and then we're going to go into the back loop only of the first stitch, and then find the corresponding stitch on the underside of the foundation chain from the first row and slip stitch together. So back loop only, corresponding chain and slip stitch, and we'll do this all the way across until you get all of those stitches connected together. Just making sure that it's laying correctly. And then once you've gone all the way across, you can go ahead and fasten off. And then all you have left to do is sew in your ends. So I really hope that you've enjoyed making your Skylar sweater. Please make sure that you tag me on social media so that I can see your finished makes. And if you like this video, then you might also like this one too.